The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
14:20 in the morning, 14 minutes and 20 seconds where the sports talk to get you through your daily commute. Hot takes, recaps, best bets, and a little humor to get your day going in the right direction. Sit back, grab your coffee, and let's get into it.
The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
14:20 in the morning for this 26th day of October 2023. Today's show is brought to you by SeatGeek.com and the SeatGeek app. Use promo code 1420POD at SeatGeek.com today and save yourself $20 on your first purchase. Remember, we are part of the Belly Up Media Network. Go to BellyUpSports.com for all the great articles and other podcasts, such as the Corner Booth podcast and the Rising the Occasion podcast with Josh and the guys over there. Thank you very much from all of us here at 1420 World Headquarters for taking time out of your day to listen to us or watch on YouTube, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel when you get a chance. Right now, I am joined by Jake Tomei out of WMKR Radio out of Taylorville, Illinois. Jake, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. Let's talk a little bit of Chicago and area sports. Geez, Jake, you're a Packers guy. The Green Bay Packers are having a tough go of it right now. They currently sit at 2-4. At least they're not in last place. If they had more games, they'd probably be right there with the Chicago Bears. But what is going on with the Packers?
Yeah, normally my saving grace to get away from Chicago sports, which has been absolutely dreadful over the past few years, is I had the Packers, and they were good. So to see them kind of just tumble is unfortunate, but it's a lot of things. You know, you look back at it. I mean, they've been hit by the injury bug pretty hard. Their defensive coordinator is awful. He has been for the past 3 years. It's nothing that's changed. Situationally, the defense is horrible. And, you know, one thing that I haven't expected to see that has happened is the regression of Jordan Love. He started the year off really strong, and as the year has gone on, he's gotten worse, which is interesting because he just got Christian Watson back. Aaron Jones is returning to the lineup, and since they've come back, he's statistically got worse. So it's really interesting time in Packerland right now. Packers Twitter is definitely an interesting place to be as you go on. Just everything you can hear about fire Matt LaFleur, fire Joe Barry, Caleb Williams hunt. So it's been a wild time on Packers Twitter, and it's an interesting time for the Packers in whole.
The transition to Love, like you said, he started out great, but the transition to Jordan Love from Aaron Rodgers and that whole saga that dragged on for far too long, in my opinion, they probably should have transitioned to that a while before, I think. But that transition has not gone well at all, and it's a situation where if you have a kid who doesn't get to play right out of college, he sits around. Yes, you get mentoring. I understand that from one of the all-time greats, but you got to be able to play. And by not playing for a couple of years, basically, I think that's been the biggest downfall because the season can be tough. And now you're into game 8 going this week. What's your thoughts on the transition and how the Packers handled it?
Yeah, going back to just the beginning of it, you saw what Gutekunst was trying to do when he drafted Jordan Love, because you look at that 2019 Packers team and Aaron Rodgers had a down year. It was kind of, we all knew it was fluky. It was kind of like the Vikings last year where they go 11-1 in one-score games. You kind of knew it was fluky because they weren't winning by a lot, and when they did get beat, they got beat by a ton. But obviously they go to the NFC Championship, and then Jordan Love's drafted. And then after that, Aaron Rodgers went back-to-back MVPs. And now you're going, well, we have to keep on to him. And finally he has another down year, and they move off of him. But like you mentioned, it's hard to just step into the NFL without playing in the past 3 years, especially coming out of a school like Utah State that doesn't have, a ton of big game energy, to step right into the NFL and try to give it everything you have. I think there's some rust there, but as I mentioned, he's regressing instead of progressing, which is never good for an NFL starting quarterback.
That's the one thing you notice a lot of sports when teams just kind of hang on and they're mediocre at best. They're 500 or just above or below, and they hang on. They get to the playoffs and don't really do anything, and then all of a sudden you get to a point like, now our star's gone, and now what do we do? Because now you're at a team that is mediocre at best. And I think mediocre is in the rearview mirror almost with the Packers right now. Is that something that maybe like bottoming out, and that maybe the Packers can look at doing that right now? You hate to give up on your season already. We'll talk about that in a second, but like you get to a point where if you are around 500, mediocre is mediocre, you're not doing anything.
Yeah, I think of like the early 2010s St. Louis Rams, coached by Jeff Fisher. They always were like 7-9 or just the 8-8. But yeah, I mean that's where you don't want to be. I mean, if you look at the Packers, they have obviously their first round pick, and then you're looking at assumingly you would have the Jets second round pick as well as your own second round pick. So I think taking is an option. The issue is what do you take? When you look around the Packers roster, it's kind of an interesting situation where do they need a wide receiver? Yeah, but they have three young guys. Who are you going to replace with that you just put some draft capital into? Obviously, the offensive line needs help. You don't know what David Bakhtiari is going to give you. You look at the running back room, sure, but you're not taking a running back top 10. And then you look at the defense where you've invested so many first round picks already. Do you go back to the defensive side? And if you do, where do you go? I think defensive line's their need if they need one, but where are you going to go? Are you going to invest that much? Obviously, safety's a huge need for the Packers as well, but not a huge amount of early first round talent at safety. So it's kind of a weird situation where they're in, where they don't have a ton of holes. They just don't excel at many things and kind of stuck in mediocrity.
They got a bunch of mediocre guys who are playing mediocre, and mediocre times mediocre equals mediocre, no matter which way you put it. Jake, that you look at that Packer franchise, and over the last 30 years, they've had two quarterbacks with Aaron Rodgers and obviously Brett Favre. And Favre's a little bit before your time. I'm sure you remember a little bit, but what's the vibe around Packerland to only have the two championships total with those quarterbacks that are legendary guys, Hall of Fame, first ballot, the whole thing, and to only get the pair of championships, that's got to be a bit tough, knowing that you're going into the unknown with which basically the unknown with Jordan Love, and then who by all accounts isn't the Brett Favre. I don't want to count him out yet, or an Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I think you look at it and there's just so many missed opportunities. Obviously, I really only started watching football 2010 area, but 2014 was devastating where they blew the lead to Seattle. And then you look at the past, well, not last year, but the 2 years before that, they should have won that game against Tampa Bay. Aaron Rodgers had a rough game, but the defense kept him in it, and they're not able to pull it out. And then you have just the bonkers game against San Francisco and the snow and the cold, and the offense just didn't show up. There's just so many missed opportunities when you look at it. Yeah, only two Super Bowl rings with two Super Hall of Fame talents that look like, I mean, yeah, top 10 all-time quarterbacks, and you get two Super Bowl rings out of it.
The losing to Denver last week's a bit of a low spot. My co-host on the 1420 podcast we do on Mondays and Thursdays, he's a big Denver fan, and he's succumbed to how bad they are, and he's accepted that Russell Wilson isn't the guy, and it's just one of those things. But when the Packers lose that game, that's got to be a bit of a kick in the pills for the Packers to lose that game, because those are games you got to win, especially when your division isn't very good, which the North is not. I still think the Detroit Lions are fraudulent myself, but we'll see. But they have a chance to win a game last week against a bad Denver team, and then pull up a stinker and lose 19-17. That's those are must wins, those ones.
Yeah, and even looking at the NFC wildcard race, like the NFC is a conference isn't very good. The wild card was right there. You dropped two in a row to the Raiders before the bye week, and then you drop one to Denver. Those are just easy games. And the one thing that I think, really looking in the grand scheme of things, is Matt LaFleur has always struggled with long time off. You look at against the Raiders, you had a Thursday night game going into a Monday night game. And then following the Raiders game, you had a bye going into the Broncos game. He's always struggled either off the bye or with really long breaks. Or so it seems like. I don't have the stats to back that up. But yeah, I mean, those are just two must-win games if you want to stay in the NFC race, and they didn't win them.
They got Minnesota this week. Minnesota acting Kirk Cousins, primetime Kirk Cousins. He's not very good when it comes down to when it's after 4 in the afternoon. But they got Minnesota this week. The Packers do. What do you think the Packers are going to do this week against Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting game. I would have to take the Vikings at this moment. You just don't know what you're going to get out of the Packers at this moment. You know, you'll drop two in a row to subpar opponents, and the Vikings are trending on their way up. It's going to be a tough task. I understand they don't have Jefferson, but Packers right now, you just don't know what you're going to get out of them. They're currently look like a poorly coached team defensively anyway. The talent's kind of dragging them along, and yeah, it's kind of a meddling type of year where you just don't know what you're going to get out of the Packers.
Speaking of not knowing what you're going to get out of them, I think you actually do know what you're getting out of this team. Let's go 3 hours south into Chicago there, and that's an absolute train wreck once again. My wife, her her brother's a big Bears fan, and he thought this was the year, and I was like, no, man, it's not. I hate to break it to you, but it's really not. What is the problem with the Chicago Bears? And they're not even mired in mediocrity. They're mired in terrible.
Yeah, they're awful, and I think it's all coaching. Me and my dad's a huge Bears fan, so we always talk about the Bears, and you could put a lot of blame on Fields. I think I think that's where the fan base wants to go. He hasn't looked like this was supposed to be his year to take the step, and he hasn't. But the offensive play calling is awful. I mean, and Eberflus, I don't think he's an NFL head coach. I think they move on to him next year. I don't know. Ryan Poles. I don't know how much of influence he had on the hiring of Matt Eberflus. I think he's going to get an opportunity to hire his own coach this cycle around, and we'll see who he picks. But I think hiring Matt Eberflus when you had a young Justin Fields always made no sense to me. It seemed like if you were going to hire a defensive coach, they had to hit on the offensive coordinator, and they missed on Luke Getsy, former Packer. But yeah, I mean they're a train wreck and they're poorly coached, and it's really showing as the year has gone on.
It's one of those things, like you can just hear the dollars falling out of Fields' pocket right now, especially after Tyson Bagent got the win last week over Las Vegas when Fields is out, and now like Fields is without a contract basically. I think after next year, and the dollar signs are just getting less and less under his name. Is this actually a good thing for the Packers that Fields is out and that they won a game? They can say, okay, Fields, you know what? We don't have to pay you. Like that we brought in whoever this guy is, Tyson Bagent of all people, and then we can say bye Justin Fields, and they can save themselves a couple of bucks, because you're seeing a lot more of these quarterbacks now that are serviceable guys, and the superstars who are getting paid, they aren't delivering a whole bunch. You go into Buffalo and that little wreck that they got going on there. But is this a good thing for the Bears that they're kind of without Fields? Is it something that they can move on with and say, thanks, bye, see you, and we'll save ourselves $35 million here?
Yeah, I mean, really, if you look at it, it's kind of a weird situation in Chicago because right now, Ryan Poles is the general manager and he didn't draft Justin Fields. So it's always kind of weird because it's not his guy. And, I think the Panthers are potentially going to have the number one pick, which belongs to the Chicago Bears. And it's going to take a lot for them not to draft Caleb Williams. And, if you draft Caleb Williams, you got 4 more years of a rookie contract. And now you spent a lot last offseason. Maybe you're trying to build the team up a little bit. And now you have an opportunity to draft another rookie quarterback, get 4 more years of the rookie deal. I think there's a potential that Justin Fields is gone after the end of the year. I don't know where he's going to end up, and they end up with Caleb Williams.
That's if Williams gets more money than getting out of USC. And I'm a USC guy, and he hasn't looked good the last couple of weeks, but that's one of those things. You must be a Notre Dame fan.
I'm not Notre Dame. I'm actually a Clemson fan, which is really odd.
That's odd.
I have a story about this. So I was in Park District baseball, and we had a draft, and I was awful at baseball. I was awful at a lot of sports, and we got drafted. Like we had a combine of I had to be like 10, and we get drafted, but they didn't use college teams, and I was drafted at Clemson, so I became a Clemson Tigers fan. This was in the early 2010s, so they weren't quite the national championship contender then. So it was a little bit of a bandwagon, but not completely. And then even looking at my other college, I'm a Duke basketball fan because my grandma was a huge Duke fan. So it looks like I'm a total bandwagon. I guess I kind of am, but yeah, interesting. Clemson and Duke, my 2 college teams.
Yeah, I'm a Duke guy, and then USC, and then the Yankees, as you can see over my shoulder here. It's one of those. So I'm every you cheer for winners. Well, yeah, it's better than cheering for losers. Pretty simple.
Exactly.
Yeah, why would you want to? It doesn't make any sense. It's getting to the halfway point of the season. You got the Bears at 2-5, and the Packers at 2-4, I believe. They're the bye week that they had. Do you see any playoff aspirations for either of these football teams moving forward?
The NFC is so weak that there's a chance if one of these teams goes on a run that they make it, just because, I mean, the NFC is awful. You're looking at potentially, I think the Rams were, last time I checked the wild card, I don't know what that updated to, but I mean, that last wild card spot really could be anybody. And if you go on a run and you look at the Packers schedule, their schedule is so bizarrely weak. I know they have the Chiefs and the Chargers coming up, but I think that's really the highlight of their schedule other than the NFC North. It's a pretty awful schedule. So maybe they go on a run, make it into the 7th seed and get blown out by whoever the 2 seed is, probably San Francisco. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting year to see if anybody of those teams can make the playoffs.
I'm not sold on the Chargers and Justin Herbert. I think that he's one of those quarterbacks that got paid because someone didn't want him to succeed somewhere else. That's he got a lot of money for doing not a whole bunch pretty early, and it's one of those things. Before we get into the World Series, let's got decide last night who's going on to that. What happened to the Chicago White Sox? You're a Chicagoland guy. What happened to the White Sox? Because they had playoff aspirations. They were supposed to be a playoff contender, and they ended up with what a 61 and 101 record or something like that. So there is some hope because of the two World Series teams had 100 lost seasons just 2 years ago. So there is some hope for the White Sox and the White Sox faithful moving forward. What happened to the White Sox?
Everything went wrong. Everything that they wanted to go right didn't. I mean, you look at the pitching. I mean, obviously they trade Lynn in the middle of the season, and Giolito gets traded in the middle of the season, but Thies regressed, Kopech regressed. Mike Clevenger, who was injured half the year, was their best starting pitcher, which is never a good sign when he's your best starter. Their
bullpen is behind him.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the bullpen, like Gregory Santos, who they picked up, and I believe Rule 5 is their best closer. Obviously, Liam Hendricks, Tommy John, and obviously the cancer comeback, he was amazing. But it's a rough year for White Sox. And you look at the batting. I mean, just they pick up Andrew Benintendi, and we all kind of knew that was kind of going to be an average pickup, and everything regressed. And I think they missed on the manager hire. I'm not a huge Pedro Gafal fan, and I don't think anybody is in White Sox Nation. It's just there's so much misery on the White Sox, and the issue is they drained their farm system to get this team, and now this team's awful. So you look in the farm system, you Colson Montgomery, and that's about it.
Yeah, and Tim Anderson's he's regressed. He had injury woes this year, and he's kind of the kind of guy that polarizing in the locker room, to say the least. He's not. He's a bit of a. I don't want to go as far as saying he's a cancer, but he's a bit of a headache, I guess, one way of putting it. And then he's. I think he's got a club option left 1 year if they can even pick it up. It used to, like a couple of years ago, you think it was a no brainer, but now they might. Because like you said, their farm system's drained and they got nothing going on. They could probably get a pretty decent pickup for a guy like Tim Anderson. To miss on your team that badly, to fall from grace that quickly. It's quite amazing, actually.
Yeah, it's just awful. I mean, I look at I don't remember the year that Bryce Harper was a free agent, but there's a stat out there. They picked up 4 guys for the total that they ended up paying Bryce Harper, and none of those guys ended up ever amounting to anything. I mean, if you add Bryce Harper to the White Sox, maybe there's something. They need a lot more than Bryce Harper, but it's Jerry Reinsdorf's inability to spend long term. Jerry Reinsdorf has no issue spending money. He just, he got shot with a cannon and he's trying to fix it all Band-Aids, and it's just not working. And so, yeah, it's pretty bad to be a White Sox fan right now. It's just a bunch of mediocrity.
The another team that out in Chicago there that's going to have a tough season no matter what. And they had a tough season last year, and they did it on purpose. They sold the farm and everything else and got rid of everything, and they've liquidated all the assets to make sure they got Connor Bedard there with the Chicago Blackhawks. What's the buzz like around that part of the world for Bedard and Bedard mania? I know you can't turn on a TV around here in Western Canada without seeing the kid, because he played in the Western Hockey League. That's right there's a team here in the area right here that he played in. What's the buzz like in Chicago for this kid?
It's no other. It's like no other. I think, when Chicago gets their superstars, I think they really, hold on to him. You look at Justin Fields. I mean, dude wasn't even a superstar, and he's got billboards everywhere. Patrick Kane, he had billboards everywhere. Chicago loves guys that they can hold on to, and Connor Bedard looks like he's going to be one of those guys. I think the pressure that's on him right now is a little much. He's only 18, and you look at the rest of the team. I mean, it's still awful. You got to remember, this was a team that got the number 1 pick last year. This team is not going to be good, and there's not
you don't get that kind of a player by succeeding. There's no
right, exactly. Yeah. So you just look at it. I mean, like he's got no help, especially Hall just hit the IL, and I mean Kurashev came back, but there's so little goal scoring help for Connor Bedard. So it's going to be kind of a down year for, I think, everybody's expectations, but the Blackhawks have a ton of cap space as it looks forward, and they have a ton of draft picks as well. So they're just beginning their rebuild, and obviously Connor Bedard helps that rebuild a ton, and he's looked great when he's been out there. But it's going to be a rough year for him and the Blackhawks in general.
I kind of thought that they might have brought back Patrick Kane. Like there's two sides to that, right? You want to start a new era and everything else, and keeping Kane around because that would be his dressing room no matter what. And you want to start a new era, but having a guy like Kane there to maybe shield Bedard a little bit from the media because it's good. It's going to be a tough. Chicago is one of the biggest media centers in the country, right? So having a kid like Bedard. Thrown to the wolves a little bit. I mean, let's see if he can handle it. He seems to be doing okay now, but you get into Christmas time and into January, you're missing home a little bit because he is a kid. Like you said, he's 18 years old. Right. I thought maybe bringing Kane back for a year or two on some kind of a team friendly deal because he doesn't need the money, but to bring him back and so he could I thought bringing Kane back was going to be a possibility.
Yeah, I maybe the interest is there from the Blackhawks. I just don't know if Patrick Kane wants to come back. I mean, I think he kind of wants to go out a winner. I think he's kind of one of those vets that's looking for another ring, and I don't blame him. I mean, this is going to be a rough Blackhawks team, whether or not they have Patrick Kane. And I think, I like what the Blackhawks did. They brought in some veterans. Corey Perry as one that comes to mind, Nick Foligno as well.
I love him
in the Boston trade. But, I think when I remember when Patrick Kane has another winger on the other side of him, whether it was Panarin, DeBrincat, I mean, some of the times that some of the plays that they were able to create was fantastic. And I think Bedard and Patrick Kane would be one heck of a line to watch.
It would have been fun to watch. You thought that maybe there was a small chance of him once they did get that first overall pick and they might find a way to get him. He still hasn't played in signing where he still his hips kind of wonky. And I think you're right though. Like with a guy like Kane, you get used to winning, and you haven't won in a few years. I think the last one was in 14 that they won, and then
15,
yeah, 15 there, and you go, okay, well, it's 8 years. It's 8 years. You know what? And I only have maybe 2-3 years left in this body. If that, you might want to go to winner, like you said. I was talking to a guy a few weeks back about Sidney Crosby, kind of thinking the same thing. Like if the Penguins don't get something going, would Crosby move away to maybe win something? Because it's been a while since they won anything, and he's a winner. Like he wants to win. He's a competitor, and it's one of his biggest attributes is his will to win. And when you don't have a chance to win, and that's why these guys get to where they are in their careers, is their wills to win.
Yeah, I know. I wonder if the Erik Karlsson deal maybe had something to do with it. Maybe Crosby talked to management and said, "Hey, I want to win, and if I'm not able to win, that maybe I'm gonna leave the team." And maybe they went, "All right, well, let's get something another piece." And they brought in Erik Karlsson. You never know. I mean, I look at Ovi as well. I mean, Ovi, we think he has so much loyalism to the Washington Capitals organization, but maybe he's getting up there. I think maybe he leaves and tries to get one more year. I don't know what his contract situation looks at, but maybe.
That's one of those ones that where because these owners don't owe these players, especially guys like that. They don't owe them a thing. I mean, they got a championship. They've made money beyond belief that they'd ever thought they would ever see. And then, but these owners, like if Ovechkin wasn't within the 80 goals, whatever it is, of Gretzky's record, I don't think you would see Ovi in a Washington Capitals jersey. If he was 200 goals away, he'd probably be playing somewhere else if he still wanted to be playing. But they can sell this whole thing for the next couple of years. Like these owners don't owe these guys anything. And maybe it's just Ovechkin sticking. It's just so the owners want to make a bit more money there with Ovechkin. It's one of those things. That's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, and Ovi's going to get the opportunities on the top lines. I mean, not that Ovi doesn't deserve that, but I mean, especially as the year goes on. I mean, the Capitals' future kind of looking a little bleak. Especially with the start that they're out to this season. So I think he's going to have some opportunity to score a lot more goals if he wants to.
The World Series it's going to be a dud. I don't know anybody west of or east of you is going to be watching this thing with the Arizona Diamondbacks and the Texas Rangers. Not the two sexiest franchise, not the biggest fan bases by any means. Like I said earlier, a couple 100-loss season for both from a couple years ago. It kind of goes to show that maybe if you just stick to it, and both teams, they went about it separate ways. Like Texas went out and spent a bunch of money, and with Marcus Semien and the like, and then the Diamondbacks, they have a bunch of guys out of their farm system, young guys, young pitchers. Like it's crazy to see that happen. If they gave Jake a franchise, how would you build your franchise? Spend, and buy, or build it through the farm and hope?
I think it depends on how much money I have. I mean, $556 million, I believe they spent on DeGrom, Scherzer, and Seager. That's a lot of money to shell out to some of those guys. But I think if you have the opportunity, you spend the money and see what happens and hope you can build enough around. Now, there's obviously some times where that doesn't work. Look at Los Angeles Angels, where you just have 3 great players and you're not able to do anything about it. But I think building through the farm system works, and it's working for the Diamondbacks. I think they've caught a little bit of a magic run here. Reminds me of the Bengals, the one year that they went to the Super Bowl. just kind of caught lightning in a bottle. But yeah, I think I would spend the money if I had the opportunity and hope you can put something around it.
It's crazy to think that these two teams are going there. Like you look at how Texas stumbled into the postseason. They basically crapped all over themselves in the last 3 weeks of the season. We're lucky to even get in because they led that division all summer long. And then Arizona had 84 wins, I think, and they had a negative run differential. Now they're going to the World Series. Who are you picking?
I think I'm going to take the Rangers. I think the Diamondbacks are going to run out of momentum. I was rooting for the Phillies, so maybe that I have a little bit of bias, but yeah, I think the Rangers have the guys that have been there before with Seager. I mean, other than that, I mean, they're two brand new organizations pretty much. There's not a lot of championship experience on either one of those teams. So I think it'll be a rather entertaining World Series. I don't know how many people are going to tune in to watch it because, as you mentioned, two just not big brands in baseball at
And even
all.
people in Arizona aren't from Arizona. So
Right,
they're not,
exactly. I mean,
they're fans of everybody else when they're there, right? So it's
right. I mean, Arizona sports in general have kind of had an issue with keeping stuff going. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But yeah, I think I'll take the Rangers.
I think the Rangers are going to win just because eventually they got to win a home game. That's one of those things, and I think that they're just too good, too strong, and kind of built for it. And I think you're going to see you might get a good start out of Scherzer. You'll see if he's going to make the roster because he didn't have a great start his last time out. But I think you're going to see one good legend like legacy kind of a start out of Scherzer. And I think it's going to be a really good World Series. Like for a baseball dork like myself, I'd be watching regardless, no matter what. But yeah, like it is too bad you won't have a lot of eyeballs on it because once again football's king and that's just how it is. It's crazy how the fall classic has turned into the nobody really cares because of how big football is, especially down your neck of the woods.
Yeah, if it's not Dodgers Yankees, it's hard for people to get into it, and that's just something that baseball's kind of come to and has to deal with. But yeah, two non-major brands, which and it's kind of weird too, because you look at the markets that they're in. I mean, Dallas, Fort Worth is a pretty big market, and Phoenix is
Huge.
obviously a pretty big market, but just the brands aren't there. So the national, international waves to watch this series isn't there.
Yeah, it's crazy to think. What do you remember about the Cubs World Series victory? What do you remember about that?
That was a magic. I mean, it was so weird for the city of Chicago because um, everybody loved the Cubs. I mean, even as a White Sox fan, obviously they were playing the Guardians, but I was rooting for the Cubs. I mean, some White Sox fans aren't going to enjoy that, but it was amazing for the city. I mean, just everybody was in on that bandwagon, and everybody wanted to see him win. Even people that hadn't watched baseball in a while, they wanted to see the Cubs win, and there was a ton of draw for it. So it was really awesome to see them win. I hate saying that, but it was cool for the city.
No, I was glued to that one. Like it was remarkable drama the way it went 7 games, then the 10th inning, the little rain delay, and the whole bit. And it was such an entertaining World Series. One of the best in my lifetime that I seen ranks right up there with the 01 World Series that the Yankees actually lost. But yeah, it was a great drama in 2016. I actually went to Wrigley in 2017, the year after, and went for the tours stuff. It's great. It's a great ballpark. It's a lot of fun. I have yet to go to whatever they call where the White Sox play. What is it? Guaranteed mortgage this year?
Guaranteed rate field is what
Guaranteed rate field. That just
it's
rolls
the
off the tongue.
cell. That's what everybody calls it here, US Cellular Field. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's now the guaranteed rate.
Yeah. What's that place like? I've thought about going. It's never, yeah.
I will. It's kind of it's an average ballpark.
Yeah.
I think but the food is fantastic. If you're going to go there for anything, the food is absolutely top notch. I think it's kind of been voted on as the best food in the MLB. It's the food scene at Guaranteed Rate is awesome. I think there's a great atmosphere when it's a big game, but you get some of those times where, especially towards the end of this year, where no one showed up. But yeah, if you're going for Guaranteed Rate, I would shoot for the food.
Yeah, it looked like people dressed as seat night night there all the time there in Chicago. It's tough going. Chicago sports are like it's such a like you had the Bulls dynasty obviously, and then the Hawks dynasty, and the Bears haven't done anything in how long. Yeah, it's she must be tough being a Chicago sports fan a little bit.
I think what the Cubs were the only team that finished over 500 this year. I mean, the Bulls aren't going to do it. Cubs finished, I think, 2 games over 500. I think they finished 84 and 80, so 4 games, whatever you want to call it. But White Sox, obviously, 100 loss team, and then obviously the Blackhawks just got #1 pick in the draft. So it's a rough time to be a Chicago sports fan right now. And I don't see it changing in the near future.
Jeez, it's crazy to think the market that size would be like that. Like it's it's odd. You can get free agency and everything, and how it just doesn't like because most seasons it ebbs and flows, but for a whole city to not have anything for that long, it's just it's kind of nuts. But from those
It's the third biggest city in the U.S. that they just can't win at all.
Yeah, things will turn around, Jake. I have high hopes for you. Who's your you're a Packers guy? Is that your favorite team?
Yeah, probably the Packers. I think the big thing with me is like the Packers have been the only winning team I've had, so I think I've focused most of my attention towards them because they're winning. Like my other teams have been losing. Growing
you still
up,
got Clemson though.
I do. Not anymore. They're pretty bad.
They're having a tough one.
College football scene this year.
Yeah, they're having a tough one. Jake, thanks for coming on the show. We'll talk afterwards what we're going to do later on. But what do you got going on? What's happening in the world of Jake?
Yeah. So got some volleyball playoffs going on for high school volleyball, and then transitioning into some high school basketball as it comes up here. So always fun when you get to call high school sports. There's a unique atmosphere. I call a 1A Illinois high school football team. So as small town as it gets, and you just get the community feel. It's always an awesome feeling to, kind of get the community involved in high school football.
No, I like up here. It's not high school sports aren't as nearly as prevalent as they are down. Like even if you go 2 hours just south into Montana, once you cross the border, it's a whole different world when you guys with your college and high school sports. I've been quite envious of that my entire life actually because I went to I was out in Vancouver Island last weekend with visit my sister and her daughter. We went and watched the high school football game there, and there wasn't 20 people watching that game last Friday. So I'm quite envious of what you guys have going on down there because it brings community together. And like it really does because a lot of people like they're alumni of the schools and things. It helps grow the community 100%. Like it's and what about WMKR? What's happening there?
Yeah, we have a 90s country and yesterday and today country and do the 90s and 9 request show in the morning. So that's always fun. Get some callers, get to hear some 90s country that I never heard. Of course, I was born in 2002, so all of it predates me. So I grew up on country music though. My dad was a huge country music fan, so I know some of it.
Alan Jackson and Garth Brooks, and who else is out there? Martina
Garth
McBride.
Brooks, Alan Jackson, Tim McGraw. What do we got over here? Clint Black, Faith Hill. That's what we're looking at. That's what we're playing.
That's right up my alley. I graduated high school in 92, Jake, so that's right up my alley when I was going to the night clubs and all that crazy stuff back when I was a kid. So yeah, right on. No, Jake, thanks very much for doing this, and we'll have to have you on the show again anytime soon to talk about see how the Blackhawks are doing, maybe the end of the football season, maybe have a post-mortem at the NFL and the NFL season.
Yeah, I'm sure more depressing sports stories coming from Chicago, I'm sure.
Right on, Jake. Thanks very much. We'll talk to you later.
Of course, thank you.
SeatGeek is the ticketing app for fans like Boomstick Lady. No free throw is safe from the roar of her sticks. SeatGeek helps her find a seat in the direct eye line of the shooter so she can sit where her boomsticks make the biggest boom. Everybody okay? SeatGeek handles the tickets to sports, concerts, and more, so fans can fan.
Thank you once again to SeatGeek.com, the SeatGeek app, for sponsoring the 1420 podcast. We appreciate all the support. Make sure if you're going to a game or an event this week, and make sure you guys use 1420pod at SeatGeek.com today and save some $20 on your first purchase. And tell your friends either too. Why not? If they're going to a game or whether they might be going to. Let's get to birthdays and on this day and get you guys out of here. What do we got here? Happy 40th birthday to Francisco Liriano, born on this day in 1983 in San Cristobal, Dominican Republic. Liriano made his big league debut September 5th, 2005 versus the Texas Rangers, going one inning, giving up a home run to the very first batter he ever faced in Gary Matthews. Liriano settled down after that, striking out the next two batters he faced and closed the game out in the Twins' loss to the Texas Rangers that night. Things would get a lot better for Liriano as he threw a no-hitter versus Chicago White Sox on May the 3rd, 2011 in the Twins' 1-0 victory over the White Sox. Liriano is a one-time All-Star who played 14 years in the big leagues and has a career batting average or career numbers of 112 and 114 with a 4.15 ERA, striking out 1,815 batters while making stops in Minnesota, Chicago, Pittsburgh, Toronto, Houston, and Detroit. Happy birthday to Francisco Liriano. And his no-hitter, I think he walked 6 guys, if I recall correctly, but it's one of those things. He still got a no-hitter. You can't argue with that. It was one of the messier no-hitters. I think he only struck out 3 as well in that game. But happy birthday nonetheless to Francisco Liriano. And, of course, this one is going to bring a tear to my eye a little bit. On this day in 1996, the New York Yankees beat the Atlanta Braves 3-2 in Game 6 of the World Series in front of 56,375 people at Yankee Stadium in the Bronx, New York. The Yankees scored all 3 of their runs in the 3rd inning. Paul O'Neill scored on a Joe Girardi triple. Girardi scored on a Derek Jeter single. And then Jeter stole second base and scored on a Bernie Williams single. Jimmy Key got the win for the Yankees, going 5 in the 3rd, giving up 5 hits and going 1 run he gave it the 1 run on a base loader walk in the 4th. Jermaine Dye, Mariano Rivera went in for the 7th and 8th, pitched 2 innings of shutout relief before giving way to John Wetland. The Braves made it close in the 9th when Ryan Klesko scored on a Marquise Grissom single, but that's the closest they would get as the next batter, Mark Lemke, fouled out to Yankees third baseman Charlie Hayes, sending the Yankees fans and the team into a frenzy by winning the World Series, their 23rd in franchise history, and their first title since 1978 on this day in baseball, Yankee history, and everything else that happened. It was great reminiscent about those old stuff and those old names like Bernie Williams and obviously Jeter and Girardi, and you go through the names of all those great Yankee teams. That team's a long ways away from winning a game in 1996. Is a long time ago since that happened, but it's a lot of fun reminiscing about that stuff. Anyways, thank you very much for listening to the show. Make sure you guys subscribe to our YouTube channel to get our numbers up there and watch the show. Great highlights, great clips, and everything else. Thanks especially to Jake for joining us on the show to talk about some Chicagoland sports, everything else. A great talk, have a conversation. He's going to be our new intern for the 1420 podcast. Bring some youthful exuberance onto the show. Going to help us out. He's got a very good resume for being such a young guy. Got a lot going on in his world. So thanks very much for Jake for joining us, and we'll get him on the show a few times. Maybe introduce him to Dave too, and we'll get going. Maybe get him on the 1420 podcast as well. Thanks, Jake. Once again, everybody. That's all we got for today. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow. And remember, it doesn't matter where you are; it's who you're with. Have a great day, folks. We'll talk to you tomorrow. You just listened to the 1420 Sports Bar Podcast. 4 beer with the sports talk and a whole lot more. We are part of the Belly Up Media Network. Let's get into it.